Concluding my experience with A Wrinkle in Time, we have the 2018 adaptation. And like with the other one, I'm torn with this because having listened to the 30-minute making of thing, and I'm sure that if I listened to the commentary track, what I heard there would be echoed, but I can tell that the people behind this movie did really appreciate the book and wanted to make a better adaptation of the movie, because this movie, unlike the 2003 version, had a proper budget behind it, knew what it was going to be from the get-go, set out with its ambition, and then they made the movie. Sure, the director did somewhat want to modernize things because she made it clear from the get-go that she wanted to get a diverse cast within the movie, which is why it's a mixed parentage for Meg. Not that that's a bad thing, and if anything, I felt that it added to the movie. And like with the other adaptation, little things that they put in there that weren't in the book, such as trying to give the bully a little bit of personality and showing Calvin's father rather than his mother, I felt like all those little bits were just nice little tidbits, you know? That wasn't a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. Nah. But the problem was when you again started getting to the more concrete bits that were following the book, this movie, in essence, kind of fell apart, because when I was at the climax of this, I didn't really feel any apprehension, even though, to be fair, I am watching the same story for the fourth time in like 10-ish days, so that does have a little bit to play with it. But just as I was watching the battle with it here, I felt like it was just over the top with the special effects and all that stuff, and I didn't really feel concerned for Meg or Charles Wallace at all. And also, when she's trying to use her love for Charles Wallace to bring him back, the actress is saying the lines, but she's saying them in kind of a bland way. Granted, the Meg in the 2003 adaptation, it was kind of the same, but in all the scenes building up to it, I felt that she was saying it with purpose. So, even though it was coming across as blander than I wanted to in the other adaptation, I felt nonetheless it was being done correctly. Here, it was just, okay, she's saying the words, but I'm just not believing it. And the whole recharacterization of Red Eyes, it just seemed like that was there more for just like an exploitation of the character. Now, I do get that part of the reason they did that is because they actually literally made Red Eyes a puppet in this version, but just there was no menace from this Red Eyes. You had some unpredictability, I'll give you that, but that had more to do with the special effects telling the story rather than the actor delivering the emotional value, the emotional punch, so to speak. That just wasn't there. Also, the elimination of Aunt Beast, even though they did make a deleted scene that had Aunt Beast in there, it just caused the whole second half of the story to go that much faster. Now, granted, the technical second half of the story, meaning that if you ignore everything that's said on Earth and everything that's said on Ural, if you ignore those bits in the book, you're eliminating more than 50% of the story. Okay, which is kind of what this movie is going for in terms of the pacing. Okay, I freely admit that. But it just felt like that they were doing it much more accelerated here. Like, if you thought that it was just a Cliff Note story thing when you were reading the book, which I kind of did because I didn't grow up with this story, okay, this movie felt like that even more. And it felt just a lot more like the special effects were telling the story, even though this does kind of contradict to what I was saying when I heard the 30-minute making of bit, because I could tell that the director, her heart was in the right place, and a couple of the other people involved in this movie, they had actually talked to Madeline Angle while she was still alive, so they felt like they understood a good amount of what they did with the story here. And then I remember when I saw this cover, and I was going, okay, so Oprah's going to be Mrs. Whatsit, then Reese is probably going to be Mrs. Witch, because based on just the style of the makeup, I'm thinking that Mindy/Kelly from the US version of The Office is going to be Mrs. Who. But imagine my surprise when I learned that it was actually Reese who was Mrs. Whatsit and Oprah was Mrs. Witch. But as I saw them characterizing the roles, I realized, actually, yeah, it makes way more sense that Oprah is the oldest and the wisest out of all of them. And I do like how this Mrs. Witch was a lot more sure of herself, more accepting of the kids in comparison to her counterpart in the other adaptation, even though I will still defend that the different characterization of her in that film worked. Okay? I will defend that recharacterization of Mrs. Witch in the '03 adaptation. Okay? But, yeah, just Oprah as Mrs. Witch, that made a lot more sense. And Reese being Mrs. Whatsit, she really brought out the more carefree attitude of Ms. Whatsit that you do get some of in the book when she's encountering Meg's family for the first time. She kind of carried that a little bit too much in there, though, because this adaptation completely ignores the fact that Ms. Whatsit used to be a star. Heck, they don't even really discuss the black cloud that much. They make it seem like that the black cloud is literally like radiation emanating from Camazotz rather than a supernatural being that happens to be surrounding various planets. Or maybe that's just my interpretation of it. Because the filmmakers of this movie do make it clear that there is a bit of a commentary that is done that you could have a bit of your own interpretation, okay? I did a horrible job of phrasing it, but if you watch the making of the thing, you know what I mean. Yeah, so, but again, the actors, I felt like they did the right choice, but the problem was the later half, it just relied on the special effects telling the story. Yeah, it was just a lot more over the top in your bits, and then like how Meg is all of a sudden able to discover that invisible way into the facility, find her father on her own with barely any help from Mrs. Who unfortunately mainly seems to have lines in this adaptation just for the sake of having lines that emulate the book, because Mrs. Who in the 2003 adaptation, even though most of her lines are all word for word from the book, I nonetheless felt that the lines mattered the exact same way as they did in the book. This movie, they were there really for the sake of being there, and I'm not trying to harp down Mindy, okay? She did what was required for the role. She did great. It's the script. So, yeah. Not to say that all the visual effects things were bad, because this adaptation, I think, showed the rhythm of the Camazot's situation be a lot more in your face, but it only worked for that one particular scene. Yeah. After that, it kind of fell apart. Like all that central intelligence, that didn't work so well. The O3 adaptation did that a lot better. The school bit, that actually had a lot more emotion into it than the 2003 adaptation did, which I was pleased about. The fact that we got to see a little bit more of Meg's father at the beginning of this, and showing how Meg's mother was a little more emotionally distraught after that, that hurt. That was good, yeah. But then also her and Calvin's interaction, there really wasn't that much interaction with them. It was just more of, oh yeah, let's stick together. They're all, what the heck, I'm gonna go ahead and eat this burger. There was a couple of little nice moments in there, but nothing that really hinted that the two of them could go into something more, because it's there if you look between the lines in both the book and the O3 adaptation. Here, I at least didn't pick up on that. Yeah. And I think that almost sums it up, to be honest. So, again, like the O3 adaptation, they were trying with this, but ultimately the second half just came with a lot of special effects just taking over the story, and it just didn't end up working. I think really what it comes down to is that this story, as it is, cannot be adapted into a full-length movie unless you put in a bunch of original stuff, but then people would be complaining that this original stuff is too much unlike the original story. The same is true of A Sound of Thunder, where the full-length movie doesn't have that much to do with the short story at all, because the short story is only large enough for like a half-hour cartoon, which is, I think, what this story really should end up being, even though I don't mind the full-length A Sound of Thunder movie, but that's because I saw the movie several years before I even knew that it was a short story. Yeah. So that's probably why. Yeah. Conversely, if I had grown up with these movies, or at least the O3 adaptation, and then saw the book, read the book, maybe I view these a little bit better than I actually do. Because I don't think that these are bad, but they have all kinds of areas where they don't work, that it ends up feeling like a weak product in the end, despite being made both times with good intentions. So the O3 adaptation, if I recall correctly, I think that I said I gave that 2 out of 5 critique and a reluctant 3 out of 5 personally. So this adaptation, I'm going to do the exact opposite. So I'm going to give it a reluctant 3 out of 5 critique and give it 2 out of 5 personally. And I'd say that concludes my journey with A Wrinkle in Time. Am I going to read any of the other books? Honestly, I don't think so. Not because I thought that the original was a bad book, but I feel like it was just a one and done kind of story. Oh, it's great that Madeleine L'Engle was able to get 4, arguably 9 additional books into this universe. That's great. But I don't really have any desire to continue with it, because yes, I know that the Black Cloud is still out there, but the story, from my perspective, was never about the Black Cloud. The Black Cloud was just a reason for all the evil to have started in the first place. The real story was Meg and Charles Wallace trying to find their dad, and they do. And that's that. Because, like, just because you know that there's more books doesn't mean that you always have to read them. There are all kinds of book and movie series where you end the first one despite knowing that there's going to be more, and then you're good. Good. Star Wars Episode 4, Star Wars Episode 3, first Harry Potter. Arguably the first Lord of the Rings, that's a lot harder to justify. First Twilight book, first Hunger Games, just, you can stop right there. Heck, the only Divergent book that I've read is the first one. I have every intention of finishing them at some point. I just haven't gotten around to it, but it's been like 6 years since I read them. I'm fine with that ending, even though I do want to continue, I know with all of those things that there's more, but it's perfectly fine to just stop after you do the first one. No. So there you go. Well, I am glad that I did this experience, though. I finally got rid of a 20-year-old memory that has surfaced a few times over the years, and yeah. And again, I can tell that there are elements of this story that have been used in various works of media since. So that highlights the impact that this story had. There you go. See ya.